Grow up.
Moana Maki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, apparently, according to Melissa Lee and the National Government, everything's just going great in New Zealand at the moment. It is. Everything's fantastic. People aren't finding it hard to pay the bills. People aren't finding it hard to put food on the table. Everything's hunky-dory in the National Party. Well, it might be hunky-dory as they sit there on their parliamentary salaries, their ministerial salaries, that they may have forgotten that there are an awful lot of New Zealanders out there who are finding it incredibly tough going at the moment. And those kind of speeches claiming that everything's going great and the government's got all the answers just shows why New Zealand is going further and further backwards, why New Zealanders are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. And I want to talk particularly about provincial New Zealand and how hard people are finding it in the regions of New Zealand. Now, we've seen a mass exodus over the last year from provincial New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is already one of the most urbanised countries in the world. That's not a healthy state of affairs for a country that relies on agriculture and its primary industries as the backbone of its economy. We need strong, growing regional economies. We need them there so that we have the schools, we have the hospitals, we have the infrastructure that those regional communities need to survive. And this national government, just as they did in the 1990s, is undermining the very backbone of our country in the provinces. 2,500 people left for Australia from Gisborne and the Hawke's Bay last year alone. 4,000 from the Bay of Plenty. How is that good for the New Zealand economy to have a mass exodus of young people in particular from provincial New Zealand? And then you look at what the government's doing in roading. And Melissa Lee defended motorways. We know why she likes motorways, because she thinks that it's part of National's law and order and crime prevention package. But the reality is that the National Government have taken money out of the regional roading fund that used to go to support and help small provincial councils pay for their local roading to put them all into roads of national significance, which are mostly around Auckland. Well, did you know in the Eastern Bay of Plenty we have a Fonterra factory at Edgecombe? And the local mayors actually tracked the truck movements of the trucks that service that Fonterra factory and found out that 70% of those truck movements are not on state highways, they're on local roads paid for by the local councils. Really? 70%. Wow. So when you undermine that roading network, you are undermining the very businesses that keep those provincial communities going. And I invite any member of the National Party, including our local MP, to come to Gisborne and to have a look at the state of the roads in Gisborne, because in Gisborne City, the roads are full of potholes. It is absolutely appalling how the roads have degraded over the last few years and how our council is struggling to pay to repair those roads. Now, we have a rail line in Gisborne that the government's about to close. The government's about to close. I'm fairly certain they're about to close it from the answers that they've been giving and the fact they blocked our petition at Select Committee. Mayor Meng Foon, 10,000 people signed a petition calling on the government to save the Gisborne to Napier rail line. They haven't even bothered to contact our mayor and tell him that they've stalled that petition because they don't want to deal with it because they're about to close our rail line. Well, do you know who one of the biggest users of our rail line is? Trucking companies. It's counterintuitive, but it's trucking companies because it's so uneconomic to run trucks from Gisborne down to Napier because of the state of the roads, because of the difficulty of the terrain, because of the wear and tear on the wheels, and because of the cost of fuel. So it's trucking companies that are putting their containers onto our rail line. And until we had the washout of our rail line, we had added 4 extra trains a week at the beginning of the year. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council were given a report that actually said the Gisborne to Napier rail line is not able to cope with demand. It's got nothing to do with lack of demand, cannot cope with demand because the government won't provide it with locomotives to run even more trains on that rail line. It is economically viable. It is fixable. For $4 million, we could save the Gisborne to Napier rail line and those companies that rely on it to get freight in and out of Gisborne, one of the most isolated parts of the country, the most isolated, with one of the most vulnerable roading networks. There was a point in which the road north through the Waiweka Gorge was closed. Because of bad weather, the road south was closed, the road around the coast was closed, the airport was closed, nothing could get in or out of the port. For a few days, our rail line was the only link in and out of the Gisborne district. until a washout took out the rail line as well. And that washout happened because culverts weren't being cleaned, and so the water was forced through under the rail line instead of where it should have gone. That rail line needs to be saved. It's an integral part of the provincial infrastructure, and this national government continues to undermine regional economies if they make stupid decisions like closing the Gisborne to Napier rail line.
Tim McIndoe.
Mr. Speaker, what a wonderful time it is to be a citizen of the mighty Waikato.